Can everybody hear? Yeah. Welcome to the panel. Thanks very much for coming down here. My name is Townsend Fian, and I'm the CEO of IAB Europe, which is an association of online advertisers, digital advertising, the digital advertising ecosystem. And we have had the honor of being part of the TYPES consortium for the last 2 years of the project, which finishes in the third quarter of this coming year. And I'm just going to introduce the panel, keeping close enough to the mic but not falling off my chair. And I think we have quite an illustrious collection of interveners today, and I'm going to give a little bit of information about each of them before we get started. So moving from my left over to the end of the table, start with, Nikos Lautaris, who is Chief Scientist from Telefónica and the Data Transparency Lab, one of the co-founders of the Data Transparency Lab, which is a community of technologists, researchers, policymakers, and industry representatives working to create a new wave of transparency software that will permit end users to have a sneak peek into what happens to their personal data behind the curtains of the internet. He's currently working on answering questions like, why am I seeing this advertisement? Is the price that I see online for this ticket the same as prices seen by others? And how can we reconcile the information needs of online advertising and marketing with privacy concerns of everyday people? So next to Nikos is Christopher Clifton, who is professor of computer science. Oh, sorry. Pedro, sorry. Yeah, Pedro. Number 2, all right. So I had my papers were in a different order from our speaking order. Pedro Martín Llorado, Director of Telecommunications and the Information Society at the Spanish Ministry of Industry. Pedro has more than 30 years of experience in different positions in information technology in both the private and public sectors. He was General Inspector for the Plan of Telecommunications and Information Technologies in the Ministry of Defense. He's been Director of the Spanish Observatory for Telecommunications and the Information Society, in charge of elaborating indicators. He's at present an advisor to the Telecommunications Users Unit in the Secretary of State for Telecommunications, in charge of assets of telecom performance from the user side. Then next to Pedro is Professor John Byers. John is Professor of Computer Science at Boston University. His academic research centers on data analytic and algorithmic challenges in 2 disciplines: the science of computer networking, meaning transport protocols, network architecture, for example, and the empirical study of internet platforms such as Airbnb, Groupon, and Yelp. As founding chief scientist at the Kogo Labs Technology Incubator, he helps research and design their own technology platform, which provides proprietary methods for online advertising, algorithmic marketing, and data analytics that help power incubated portfolio companies from inception to profitability and beyond. Next to John is Professor Chris Clifton, Professor of Computer Science at Purdue University. Chris works on data privacy, particularly with respect to analysis of private data. This includes privacy-preserving data mining, data de-identification and anonymization, and limits on identifying individuals from data mining models. He also works more broadly in data mining, including data mining of text and data mining techniques applied to interoperation of heterogeneous information sources. Next to Chris is my colleague from Google, Will DeVries, who is Senior Policy Counsel at Google, Senior Privacy Counsel for Google, advising Google on global data protection compliance and product development. Will's work covers a broad swath of privacy issues with a special focus on online advertising. Prior to Google, Will taught information privacy law and e-commerce law at the George Washington University Law School and worked in the Communications, Privacy, and Information Law Group at WilmerHale LLP, which is a DC-based, major DC-based law firm. He's a graduate of Princeton University and the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. And then finally, all the way over on my left, is Claire Levallois-Bart, who is Associate Professor of Law at Télécom Paris Tech and Director of the Chair of Values and Policies of Personal Information. Claire works for the Economics and Social Sciences Department at the university. She's an expert in data protection law and privacy, coordinator of the Chair Values and Policies of Personal Information, launched by the Institut Mines Télécom in Paris in 2013. The chair is a multidisciplinary research team working on different aspects such as legal and regulatory compliance, technical security, systems and data, economics of personal information sharing, etc. She's also the General Secretary of the French Association of Data Protection Officers. So Nikos is our moderator. Do you want to take over?
Yes. Thank you very much, Tony. Good morning, everyone. I will start with giving a little bit of context about what TIPES is, and then open up the discussions with the panel. So the TIPES is a European H2020 research project. It's a consortium of big companies, SMEs, and academia. And for the past 2 years, we've been working on developing a new breed of software that we call transparency software. Chris, can you go to the next one? We are referring to simple-to-use tools, basically, that answer things like, this particular advertisement that I see on a web page, has it been targeted to me or not? Or is it a part of a broadcast regular campaign, let's say? For example, we have built something that's called I Wonder, which is a simple add-on for your browser. You integrate it over there, and then it identifies the ads on your page, it tags them, and then by clicking on a small green circle that I Wonder puts on the ads, it can tell you something about the advertisements. It can also tell you something about how your browsing history looks from the advertiser's perspective. Do they think that you are into online gaming? Do they think that you are a sports guy? Do you think that you are a compulsive buyer? What is your reflection towards, your projection towards the advertisers based on the information that they get? And last but not least, if we manage to get enough users using I Wonder, then we might have a chance to basically be able to reverse engineer parts of targeting. The idea is that users use this piece of software and report something about the ads that they see back to a server. So then, when you see an ad that for whatever reason you don't like and you think that it has been targeted to you, then you can query this backend and get some information about other people that have seen the same ad. And if you see that the demographics of the audience of this ad is pretty diverse, both men and women, of different ages, different demographics see the same ad, then probably it means that it's not targeted to you. But if you see a concentration of views on people that look like you, then there's a higher chance that this has been targeted. This is an example of what we're doing. We have done additional tools. For example, we have methodologies for auditing not a particular advertisement, but an entire website. Basically, by just clicking a button, you can launch a set of predefined tests that go and imitate basically a certain demographic type, and then they look whether a particular domain, a particular web page is targeting this demographic type or not. We have also developed a cool tool called Facebook Data Valuation, which is over there, also available online, that is giving you transparency on something else, on how valuable you are for the advertising ecosystem. Basically, this tool is using the ad planner of Facebook, and it's looking at the advertisements that appear on your newsfeed, and through this, it computes how much money are you making basically for Facebook, right? We've been working on this for close to 2 years, and the objective here is to have transparency, understand a little bit about what happens on the background of the web. We also have tools for deciding to block particular advertisers or pages if you find them to be showing offensive content. Now, why are we doing these things? For 3 reasons. The first one is that we want to empower users to exercise choice. So if you start going to particular websites and then you start suspecting, using the tools as well, that these websites are collecting information about you and then showing you advertisement that you find offensive, then you can basically avoid going there or even block them using a simple choice. this is empowerment for the user to exercise choice. The second potential user for the work that we are doing are the regulators, right? These tools can really help regulators effectively apply the new legislations that are coming in Europe, right? So sometimes, I recently thought that, doctors, car mechanics, they are using advanced technology, right? When you're taking your car for a service, the car mechanic is connecting a computer to your car's computer, and then he's running a bunch of tests to tell you whether everything is okay. And the doctor is basically doing the same, but for humans. So data protection authorities, regulators, whoever has the responsibility to observe the execution of these new laws should be provided with adequate technology to basically observe what other more complex technology is doing. And last but not least, we are offering these tools to the ad tech ecosystem for self-regulation purposes, because the industry is taking steps towards being more transparent and more open. But in most of the programs that we see, the underlying assumption is that you have to have full trust on what they tell you about you, right? With tools like that, the self-regulation approach becomes more trustworthy because it can be audited by independent entities using tools like that. So with that, I will close my introduction to types, and I will start giving some questions to our panelists, starting with Pedro. And my question for Pedro is, we all sense the concerns from citizens, regulators, journalists, it's all around. But when you go and you ask a particular, what is it that he's worried about around privacy leakage, some people are worried about information leaking per se, right? And some other people are worried about the consequences. Some people are worried about what will happen tomorrow with the collected information that has leaked their mobile or their laptop. And some people are worried about what might happen in 10 years. So what is your sense about what are the main fears of people around privacy leakage?
Okay, thank you, Nico. Good morning, everyone. It's a very complex question, because before to try to answer this question, I would like to emphasize about the different profile of users in internet. Is very various. From people ignoring everything, people that ignore what is an IP direction, what is everything about internet, but they are using daily internet in a very intensive way. Another users, probably everybody in this room knows near everything about internet, the risks and about what is an IP, what is the GPS position, and so on. So in this range, end to end, we can find a very various profiles of users, depending on the knowledge of the user, or they want to obtain from the online services. The awareness the awareness is absolutely different. In any case, for instance, probably in the case that everybody we are in this room, that every day we are connecting Google Maps. Google Maps knows everything about the internet people, or Waze every morning. We are conscious that all privacy is on risk, or private data are on risk, but the benefit that we obtain compensates. In the balance, we know that we are concerned with all private data, with all privacy and so on, but we decided to go ahead with the use of the apps because we obtain a quite clear benefit. It will be desirable to have in the future anonymized data and tools that Nico explained before. In the case of advertisement online, we could have tools in order to modulate this risk. So as a first, this is my first comment concerning your question. Later on, perhaps in the dialogue with the audience, we have the opportunity to argue about more detail. But summarizing, the end-to-end profile of user is very various, and depending on the profile of the users, the appreciation of the awareness is different, absolutely different. I would like also to point out about figures. You have some figures in the program, in the page 28, about the percentage of users that doing other things. It's very difficult to have measures about the behavior of the users on internet because they are declarative data. When you ask about, are you frightened about the use that Google or so on are doing of your data, the answer is declarative, not in a real question, not a real answer. To have a concrete percentage of the users in internet, it will be desirable to have online panels, to have the users connected 20 hours per day in all the devices that he or she is using in every moment in order to know in a very accurate way what happened with the use of internet, apps, website, advertising, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Yes, totally. Different users, depending on how much they understand, as was your point, have different amount of internal fear about what might happen or might happen in the future. But then again, every now and then in the news, you get these freakish examples of very intrusive uses of personal data that most of us are capable to understand. So I would like to ask John, what are your thoughts on some of the headlines that we see every now and then about really extreme poster child examples of privacy leakage?
Okay, thanks, Nikos. Is that microphone on? I don't think this microphone's.
Yeah, just really close.
So for a bit of perspective and backdrop, I thought I'd start with a little bit of the history of targeted advertising. Targeted advertising has been around since the dawn of time. We think, for example, over broadcast media, our advertisers really targeting audiences, and they really are. If you think about which ads are seen by people watching a sporting event as opposed to those watching late night TV, these are really different advertisers because these advertisers are targeting individuals who are watching those shows. So targeting by itself is nothing new. What is new is the nature and mechanisms whereby advertisers can really target much narrower groups or even individuals. So the nature of online advertising and targeting has changed over time. One of the companies that I work with, Kogo Labs, is an advertising company, and a partner that we work with provides auto insurance. They provide an auto insurance marketplace. So very naturally, they're trying to identify and target customers who are interested in purchasing automobiles, or who are buying automobiles and then also want to purchase auto insurance, or who are changing auto insurance companies. So they, of course, want to target individuals who have this intention. And today they have the ability to do so. One of the things that they can do to obtain a signal of intent is to make observations or place their ads on websites that are correlated with users who have this intention. So as a first principle, one thing that you can do for targeting is to do something very natural, is to advertise on the places where these individuals are likely to go. But if you take it a little more deeply and you start doing data collection on users and tracking, it becomes a little bit more insidious and a slipperier slope. So we all know that there are trackers out there that can, through the use of pixels and cookies, identify where an individual has gone. Through the use of IP addresses and other information, it's possible to really follow a user through the internet and identify where they've been and what they've done. And then to subsequently place individuals who you've identified as somebody who you'd like to target, place them into your audience. And many ad networks enable this functionality whereby you can place individuals or demographic groups inside an audience and target them directly. So in the context of auto insurance, this may not seem so bad in the sense that maybe you're interested in auto insurance. So having an ad that follows you and tries to sell you an auto insurance policy or takes you to an auto insurance marketplace, that's maybe a natural thing to do. However, there are definitely situations where this can go too far and both contravene societal norms or even further break laws. So some of the headlines that Nikos was referring to are ads that are very sensitive in nature. For example, ads relating to a treatment of a specific disease, or ads that target users with a specific sexual preference, or ads that target something like alcoholism. If you're in one of the groups that has, for example, a disease that is being targeted or a particular sexual preference that you might not like to reveal in public, or if you do have an alcohol problem, it may be very uncomfortable to be confronted with ads that target your group. So this is a concern. This is something where it's natural for those advertisers, just as in the auto insurance case, to want to target those groups. But by the nature of the selectivity, it becomes intrusive and can create headline risk. So I think this is something for technologists to really consider carefully. Advertisers are profit maximizing. They want to maximize their revenue. They want to sell their products beneficially. They're not very interested in placing ads in front of individuals who have no intent of purchasing their product. However, when targeting becomes very narrow and becomes excessively data-driven, there's a strong risk that ads are going to be shown that are highly customized and highly discomforting. One thing I wanted to move on to is that advertising and discrimination in advertising or targeting in advertising is a little bit the tip of the iceberg. Nikos mentioned price discrimination as an additional step. So when advertisers are discriminated against or individuals are discriminated against and shown different ads, that's one thing. When it moves on to price discrimination, this is really becoming even more impactful. And then there are many studies in the real world where discrimination can take on an even more pervasive form when people's jobs are at risk or in the context of, say, the baccalaureate exam, who is getting into which schools, can be an even more severe form of discrimination. All of these forms arise in large part due to algorithms. And we've heard it said that individuals who are discriminate can also embody these discriminatory behaviors in algorithms. So that's one risk that we have. And I would say there's even a broader risk that it turns out that algorithms which are profit maximizing also lend themselves to discriminatory behavior. For example, let's say I want to discriminate against an individual from a specific postal code. Postal code doesn't seem to be on its surface to be something where it's necessarily negative for an individual group, but by learning information about a postal code and doing something that's profit maximizing, you may well end up, your algorithm may well end up providing different information to different groups. As we all know, postal code is well correlated with socioeconomic status. It's also correlated with race in many circumstances. So there's also, again, a slippery slope by virtue of taking a piece of information about an individual and deciding and having an algorithm decide what is the best ad to place in front of this person. That can easily come across as something that looks like discrimination. So we also have to be very thoughtful and careful about what guidelines and restrictions we set up in the context of placing ads in front of users. So I think that's all I have to say for now, but I'll be happy to take more questions in the discussion.
Thank you, John. So although TYPES is focused on online advertising, this by no means means that this is the only field in which data protection is important and crucial. As John mentioned in his initial position. Now I'll turn to Chris and be a little bit more provocative. So Chris, what differentiates a good guy from a bad guy in ad tech?
That's a tough question. I was a little bit worried about getting this question. You know, I could have just said, okay, Will here is, well. So, you know, there's so many things. What's the objective? What data is used? How it's used? What's your control over the data? How that use impacts you? That this is what really we need to know in order to say whether someone is a good guy or a bad guy. The problem is, who are the players? Many of you have probably seen this slide. You know, it's such a complex environment that it's really tough to say who's doing what, who has the data, who's using it. How do you know, if you go to a data publisher and talk about their use of the data, well, maybe they aren't, but they may not be the one actually selecting the ad that you see. And who is selecting that ad? What data are they using? Well, they may be using some score which is coming from some other source. There may be nobody along the way who really knows everything involved, and the fact that they're using some of your personal data, the advertiser, the publisher, the website, nobody along that path may actually realize that they're using data you would consider personal. They can say, oh, we won't use that, and yet they are indirectly. So some of this problem, bad guys, we'd all say, and even once we know, well, the bad guys target advertising based on racial, ethnic origin, political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, trade union membership, genetic data, biometric data, health, sex life, or sexual orientation. Most of you, I assume, know where this list comes from, copied straight out of the data protection regulations. Well, what about this? Is targeting advertising based on your browsing habits being similar to others? In other words, a lot of people who look at the same things you do seem to like these ads and click on these ads. So I'm going to show you these ads because you'll likely like them too. Is that bad? Well, what if those people happen to be similar to you because of one of these protected categories? Is that okay? Is that not okay? What if it's done to show you products appropriate for you? Match your hair type. Well, that likely corresponds to ethnic background. Is that okay? Well, what about targets pregnancy prediction? That certainly seemed to raise a lot of concern. So part of the difficulty here is it's a very slippery slope between what's good and what's bad. And so what do the good guys do? Well, inform you, give you choices. So as an example of inform and choice, many of you being in the EU have seen lines like this. I'm actually picking on types right here. What's missing in this statement? The only one I've seen that actually gives you a choice of saying no is the ec.europa.edu site, where you can actually click a no. The types, one of their other websites says, if you don't want to, here's information on how to disable the cookies. So it gives you a little better. But most are not giving you choice. So, what does it mean to really inform you and give you choice? Google, for example, gives you the choice of disabling use of certain things in your profile, but in order to do so, they have to track you. If you don't want to be tracked, you can't control these choices. Well, that doesn't sound right, and yet, what's the issue? Maybe there's the technology isn't in place yet to support anything else. The good guys show you what you want. Is this ads based on particular topics? Based on your age? Based on your gender? Well, this is getting a very slippery slope of, maybe it's what you want, but maybe it's using things to do this that you don't want used. The key is it your choice? Do you have the ability to say that? And even then, are such filter bubbles good for society? My theory on a recent election in the US, everybody I talked to, that election was about one issue. Of course, it's been a different issue for everybody I talked to. Everybody sees a narrow view of society now because they only see what they want to see. They don't realize that there's a lot of other things going on out there, a lot of other issues. They don't pay attention to it. So, you know, the good guys are giving us what we want to see. Well, is that really good? So, you know, with that, I'm going to turn it over and say, how do we tell? I don't know.
Thank you very much, Chris. Well, speaking of choice, we're coming to Will. We all know that the industry in general is taking steps to be more open, more transparent, Google as well in particular. So Will, can you summarize for us what is, in your view and in the industry's view, the role of self-regulation in this area?
Thanks very much. So I'll take the mantle of, along with Tony, of defending the good guys in the online ad industry. And I think there are good guys. I think there's a lot of good guys, and a good way to tell is whether they are participating actively and vouched for by the self-regulatory organizations. NAI, Lee is right here in the front row. NAI was the first of these organizations in the U.S., and the DAA has spawned organizations around the world, including in Europe, to support self-regulation, and IAB is a member of that, as well as many of the other industry groups in the online ad space. And I think there's a couple of key roles for self-regulation. I'm going to talk about that concept broadly, not just the specific principles that are issued by groups like the NAI and the DAA, but generally speaking, the industry coming together and working out a lot of these principles by themselves. The first is that they can be much quicker to respond to changes in technology than even the fastest legal regime out there. Take the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, which works very quickly in terms of issuing reports and holding workshops. They're about the most aggressive that I've seen in terms of their time frame of being able to speak up about industry. And they only just, a day before the end of the old administration, issued guidelines and thoughts around cross-device advertising and cross-device tracking. That was, well after the industry self-regulatory groups have worked on this problem of cross-device and how the guidance should apply. So I think you can be faster, you can be more flexible. Self-regulation in this industry started with interest-based advertising back in the beginning of this century, and then has quickly come out with rules around mobile and now cross-device. Issues around use of health segments, use of sexual orientation, kids data, broad prohibitions on practices that we'd consider bad. And there's good enforcement around those. I can tell you, as someone who's responsible for complying with the annual NAI assessment, it's a real assessment, and I can say it's definitely more than I've seen in a lot of direct regulatory type situations in terms of the impact it makes on internal review and practices. So it's fast, and it evolves quickly, and it's real. I think that those speak for the value. The other point I'd make is even in the EU, where the law has set a notice and consent baseline both through the directive and in the future the regulation, as well as e-privacy, has set a baseline of a requirement for consent. Self-regulation has a really important role. It's built into the GDPR in terms of codes of conduct, so there's an avenue there. As well as being able to speak to some issues that are just not addressed. And the current code, for instance, gives a very common vocabulary and approach to providing notice in or around every single advertisement you see on the web, which goes well beyond the requirements of the GDPR or e-privacy at this point. And similarly, it gives a one-stop place to go to. It's sort of the industry's own one-stop shop to opt out of everybody from targeted advertising from all providers who are members of this group, which is about 99% of the industry, in one go. So you can go to one place and opt out of over 100 different ad vendors, including Google. So I think those are two very strong reasons to support the role of self-regulation. It's obviously not the only thing that regulates the industry, and it shouldn't be, both here or in other jurisdictions. And I think in this realm of soft self-regulation, there's also a lot of value. The industry coming together to work on problems that they're facing, to deal with issues like some of the ones that we've heard from other speakers already. You'll see, for instance, Google has been pushing out an idea called Why This Ad, which some other vendors have done in different ways, where in every single advertisement you can click on the ad and you can say, why was this ad targeted to me? What was used in terms of my data to target this ad to me? And it will say, because you visited this advertiser's website in the past. Or it'll say, because we think that you're interested in a new car. It'll tell you the reasons. And so most of our ad formats have this in place now, including on search, including on our websites that we run on publishers, our publisher network. So you can go and see that now. And that's the kind of practice that we work with around industry and pushing that could be part of a future self-regulatory environment to deal with some of the issues that we've talked about. Similarly, we've seen the ability to turn off a certain ad that you don't want to see. When you see that ad that people always talk about, the one that follows you around, and you say, well, I've already purchased this thing or decided not to purchase this thing, and I'm tired of seeing the same ad just because I went to this one website a week ago. Well, you can now mute that ad so it won't be shown to you on any of the places where we show you in ads. And so those are some of the new controls that are coming along that Google's offering that I think we can see practices emerging. And finally, I wanted to say that I think the industry is also coming together to deal with the fact that there are some bad actors out there who are serving ad formats, using data in ways, things that are harmful to all of us collectively. And we're taking steps through a coalition to try to address those. And we think that's a lot of the reason people are choosing to block ads or taking other steps to say, I don't like what's happening. And we want to make sure that those bad actors aren't causing a sort of a tragedy of the commons, making people distrust ads because for all the difficulties around online ads, it's the most it's the business model that's made the internet successful. And while it shouldn't be the only business model, it certainly is one we have to defend if we want to keep using the internet the way we have been. So that's my hopefully full-throated defense of self-regulation.
Thank you very much, Will. I'll just a brief comment on your last statement. This is truly a textbook example of a tragedy of the commons, right? There is always unilateral interest for somebody, even for a small guy, to identify a niche, go select target this niche, collect data about this niche, make some amount monetizing this particular niche, but by doing that, destroy value for the entire ecosystem, harm everyone, provoke very tough regulation and all the bad things that could happen to technology. So I'll move next to Claire. The last 2 years in Types, we've been working hard to build these tools for providing more transparency in online advertising. And truth be told, we have barely scratched on the surface of the problem. And as our previous panelists have mentioned, online advertising is just one aspect of the issues to be addressed. There are other issues, how collected information may work against us in real life. So I would like to ask Claire, do DPAs, regulators, have the right tools already? Do they have the technology to do their job? And even more fundamentally, do we have enough people to man these agencies to observe the execution of the law?
Okay, so it's true that we have tools such as data mapping and data visualization, which permits the company to know what's happened to their data, and we can also think about the procedure put in place by some company, such as Google, in order to implement the right to be forgotten in the light of the ruling of the European Court of Justice. However, there is a lot of uncertainty, for example, for the implementation of the new data portability right, which allows data subject to receive their data, which they have provided to a controller in a structured, commonly used and machinable, readable format, and then to transmit this data to another controller. And obviously, this new right can only be effective if we have a tool to do that, to do this portability, which permit to transfer the data to one entity to another. However, according to my knowledge, because too much knowledge, it's not the case at the moment. And for example, in France, companies which want to be ready for May 2018 do not find this kind of tool yet. If we want to be more optimistic, tools such as a dashboard and the dashboard you are developing in Types gives the users the possibility to be informed about the processing of his personal data and to design his consent according to his own preferences. But thus it will help the companies to implement the GDPR, the right of information, the right to access to personal data, and also the possibility, and we speak a lot about this yesterday and during the Types meeting, the possibility to collect a specific and informed consent. So dashboard can also participate from the point of view of the company to implement the obligation of accountability and to demonstrate to the data protection authority that effectively they implement correctly the GDPR. However, can we say that it constitutes a real demonstration of the concrete implementation of the legal obligation? In fact, at the moment, users have no other choice than to believe that the company is doing what it says. They just have to trust the company. This is a big issue also in our research in MatchShare. What is a real trust? How consumer can really trust company? And for example, when a company say, "Believe us, we destroy your data and we no longer keep it," in fact, the company doesn't really demonstrate that it does what it says. So to my point of view, we need also some tools that permit to really demonstrate that companies do what they say, and such a true demonstration requires the intervention of independent third parties in order to have some audit and to audit all the process from the collection to the destruction of personal data. So if we want to be optimistic, once again, we are in the right direction, but from my point of view, it's just the beginning. We really need more research, such as the type projects which aim to empower the user. This is a big issue. And this kind of development takes a lot of time. For example, the design of the types, different tools took 3 years, with 20 researchers, full time. And it concerns only, as you said, the advertising sector. One difficulty here is to understand each other. I'm coming from the legal field, you're coming from computer science, and we really have to understand some concepts. For example, we have a discussion about what is an anonymized data, and from the legal point of view, sometimes it's not the same than from the technical point of view. So we really need to discuss with each other, to have the same vocabulary. It took in my chair, because we are coming from the legal field, we have sociologists, we have a philosopher, we have economists. It took 2 years, more or less, in order to really understand each other and to have this common vocabulary. So coming to the second part of your question, do we have the right human resources to monitor and enforce the GDPR? If we took the example of France, at the moment, more than 18,000 entities have designated a data protection officer. Under French law, at the moment, it's not mandatory, but as you can see, some companies designate that DPO, and more, we have more and more DPO. But we know that the implementation of the GDPR implies to appoint more DPO, and we can, according to some research, the number of DPOs required in Europe alone will be at least of 28,000 DPO. So we've got a lot of work to do here, and it's an estimation based on official statistics about public and private sector data controllers. So I think that the education of DPO is very important, but more generally, we have to educate all the people, not all, but some people in the entity itself. And as the data are the very essence, the very economic essence of the companies, it can be for some companies the majority of the employee which from my point of view must be aware of the question of data protection and in order to implement the privacy by design principle. If I come from the market field and I don't know what is the personal data and what are the rules, it will be very difficult at least to understand the advice given by the lawyer inside this company. So according here to a Dell survey conducted this last November, close to 70% of IT and business professionals say that they are not or they don't know if their company is prepared to the GDPR, and only 3% of these respondents have a plan for readiness. So they didn't plan the training of their employees at the moment. So training have to be put in place, and courses about data protection have to be given for the employer of the company, but I think also in engineering school, in university, data protection must be a transversal question. And as an example, last week I gave for the first time a lesson on the question on data protection to PhD candidates. So that's what was the first time for PhD candidate. And I also teach to people who want to create startup inside our school on this subject. And here, and last point, it seems very important when we are doing this training to keep in mind that data protection is a multidisciplinary subject. From my point of view, I do not teach only the legal part of data protection or the technical part. What is important is that people understand during this training what is the essence of the protection of data, of personal data, because it is a human right.
Thank you very much, Claire. I couldn't agree more. Sometimes I think that even more important than the experience of building these tools is that we understood how difficult it is. So any chance that we have to interact with academics and professors, we're trying to explain the needs that are out there. And if we have young students or that are considering to do a master or do research, this is not a bad area to spend the next few years. So with that comment, I think yeah. Yes. Sorry.
I'm not actually meant necessarily to intervene in the substance of the discussion, but I wanted to come back quickly on an observation that on a question that Chris Clifton raised. So there was this question of who are the players, and I noticed some shaking heads and looks of despair or alarm at the Lumascape slide. And a lot of the companies on the Lumascape are companies that we are representing in IAB Europe. And I just wanted to, since it's not clear that everyone would be at the same level of knowledge about the regulatory landscape, and without wanting to make myself necessarily an advocate of the GDPR, I think it is important to recognize that this new regulation that, as Claire says, will be enforced as from May of 2018, will dispel and smite into oblivion any possibility of secret tracking by law. It will simply not be possible for any data controller processing personal data not to disclose quite a large range of information about purposes, the duration of purposes, categories of data, identity, whom you can contact. So the secret tracking by the murky Lumascape really oughtn't, I think, to be part of one's general understanding of the environment, at least as from 2018. And maybe one more thing. I think it might be interesting for people to understand what the state of your products is. When will they be able to download them, or is it?
Well, these are research prototypes. Okay. Some are already online. As I said, we are beta testing, alpha testing, right? Okay. So many things to be done here. I wouldn't go anywhere near saying that they are finished products. They are research prototypes. We are looking for beta testers. We are looking to hear from people how usable they are or not. And it's a long way. It's a long way. And we need more people working on that because, as we all repeated. This is a very heavy technical effort. So with that, I think we've been doing well in terms of time, and you heard a lot of things from the panel. I think it's time to open it up to the audience. So I guess there is a microphone over there. You can please start lining up. And
Jeff Chester, Center for Digital Democracy, and also U.S. co-chair of the Transatlantic Consumer Dialogue, TACD, which is a civil society group. I thank the panel. I'd like the panel to comment. I mean, when you think about the tragedy of the Commons, I'd like you to reflect this. The real tragedy of the Commons is that the digital ad and marketing industry, led by Google and Facebook and others, have created a global commercial surveillance system that is designed to influence behavioral change at profound levels that just played a role in our election and the elections here, right? We all know that, right? That fueled the process of fake news, and although perhaps the GDPR will deal with it, and the fact that there are advertising practices that facilitate the data collection, that make up the surveillance system, and just go to thinkwithgoogle.com or Think with Google in the EU just to kind of see for yourselves what's going on. So anyway, talk about this commercial surveillance system and the implications to democracy and citizens as well as consumers that have been established. Thank you.
Well, who wants to try on that? I mean, we are full of computer scientists here, and I'm a computer scientist. Whenever I hear about politics, democracy, I freak out. I'm a
I'll take it.
John, okay.
So I wanted to start with the networking point of view. I mean, I think creating the internet also creates the benefit of the potential for severe harm and surveillance. I think that while the ad network provides a vector for surveillance, it's fundamentally the internet itself, which the open nature of the internet, which is allowing for this possibility of surveillance. And the very open nature of internet communications means that inspection or monitoring of what people are doing and transacting is baked into what we're doing. So I think it goes a little bit deeper, actually, than just the advertising world. I mean, I think this is really a networking challenge. Some of us in the US and abroad are working on rethinking the design of the underlying internet to make it more secure and make it less prone to surveillance. I'm not sure if we can point the finger straight at the advertising world as being the root cause, although I agree that it is a very important vector. Somebody else?
Any other thoughts? Somebody else would like to position?
Bill, do you want to talk about anything?
I don't think there's more I could add. I agree. I mean, I think that the technology is what it is. I think there are risks with the way that the industry has evolved, but it's also the business model that has made the internet so successful and offers this great free content and services around the world. Well, I mean, free, right? Like, I pay for certain things. I like certain things. I also read certain publications for free. And I think that works well. The problem I see it, as we talked about earlier, is that it can be abused. And if you've got enough people abusing it, then you're going to drive everyone away from it. So I think we have to figure out, like, where are those problems and how can we address them? We could decide to sort of abandon the idea of an ad-supported internet and have it sort of like, sort of all of us pay a tax and we all get a free internet. That's not going to be the system of any political reality that I'm aware of. So, I mean, I think the system, it's like Winston Churchill's quote about democracy, right? It's the worst system except for all the others. So I think before we can sort of say that this isn't worked, we have to decide, well, could anything work better and how can we make this as good as it can make it? And that's what I'm sort of devoted myself to.
Yes.
Mike O'Neill, I'm on W3C tracking
Can
protection
you use
work
the
group.
mic? 'Cause we
Can
won't be
you
able
go
to
closer,
hear.
please?
Yeah, closer.
Thing.
Yeah.
Just a question to Will there, because it seems to me it's not about advertising, it's about targeted advertising, it's about behavioural advertising, which means
I don't think people can hear you.
targeting people, right?
Is it not working?
Yeah. He's targeting at the action, but I mean, Google's
Maybe it's not working.
Right. You need to talk directly into the mic.
Because in the back, they won't be able to hear you.
Yeah, hello. Google started this thing by, I mean, initially we started making money out of search and presenting ads on search, which, I don't think anybody's got a problem with. Because when you start to use it as identify people, right? So what I'm saying is, it's not advertising per se, it's behavioural advertising, which is different from contextual advertising or any other type of advertising. But not so, don't be saying that you should have no commerce on the internet. It's, you shouldn't target people. Once you started targeting people, extracting their web history, that's where the problem is. And the original question I had for Nico,
Okay.
which is this.
But I like the first question as well.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on this one.
What original? Your browser extension that collects or explains or how an advertising what they're doing with your data and so on. Is that using some kind of standard for how do you identify that information? Is it an internal database of yourself, your own, which you're giving out information, or are you making it something that the advertiser has to declare in some sort of open way? Because I'm mentioning this because the do not track standard has a way of doing that, has a way of how a particular advertiser or any domain or a website can identify what their privacy policy is, who they are, and all that kind of stuff. And whether have you looked at that?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Brief comment on the first one. I'll leave it to Will if he wants. But personally, myself, I want to be targeted, right? I have absolutely no problem with target advertising. You know, when I am shopping for something or I'm looking for something, I much rather have it that somebody gives me a good deal and I grab it and I don't waste my time doing my research and just here's a good deal, get it. So for some things, yeah. So I'm not against most of the people for what I. Not forever and not for everything. Yeah, but we cannot dogmatically say that targeting is bad, right? Because I like it, at least for me, it's not bad if it stays within some bounds. Now, coming to your question about the add-ons, I don't. First of all, maybe there has been some misunderstanding. The add-ons that we are developing are not showing advertisements. They just trying to help you understand whether you have been targeted or not. And there are many ways that you can do that, and I have like hours of talks and slides and equations and stuff. The basic idea is that you could do it completely locally with the information that is there on your web browser, nothing living on your web browser. So have some algorithms, look at your browsing history, construct some graphs that capture some of your interests, and then collect the ads that were downloaded to the browser, and then use dictionaries to assign terms to the history and to the actual ads, and then compute the overlap. And through this simple method, you can establish some correlations. Sometimes they show up clearly. Of course, this is limiting, can go up to certain identification ratio, let's say. A more powerful method is one in which multiple users report what they see somewhere, and then you have much more information to go and do the inversion to try to find the correlation. Of course, this entails dangers, and it has to be carefully, because basically what it means is that in order for someone to learn something about how his privacy is protected or not, he has to volunteer some data, right? And the way that we are doing it is that users report some of the ads that they see anonymously, and they say something about themselves so that we can establish correlations, but they say something that is very high level, cannot be connected to a specific individual, and so on. So that's the basic idea, but this is a technical matter. I mean, we have stuff online you can check. Yes, please. Next question.
I'd like to add one thing on the behavioral advertising. If you go out and buy Car Magazine, you will probably see ads for autos and auto parts. Is this not behavioral advertising? I think it's not just saying behavior or not. It's a very slippery slope. At what point does it become wrong?
It's a term, right? Behavioral advertising, we mean when you are isolated, when you're singled out as an individual by cookies and so on, this is your device, that you've got to this, you've got to that website, perhaps. So
Yeah.
That's what you call it doesn't really matter.
I don't have a ton to add, but I wanted to make one point that I think often gets missed by people who don't understand the online advertising industry at the level of depth that unfortunately a few of us have to, which is that the data collection that happens online, it happens for three main buckets of reasons. Targeting is only one of them. The other two are security and fraud. So if you run an online advertising system and you don't collect enough data to protect against click fraud and other forms of abuse of your system, you're going to quickly find yourself out of business or subject to arrest. And then the third bucket is targeting, or is measurement and conversion tracking, things like that, understanding if an ad was clicked, understanding how much to charge your advertisers, understanding how much to pay your publishers. These are metrics that advertisers and publishers demand. If you don't offer them, they won't do business with you. So there are other reasons for the data that's collected other than just targeting. And anyone wants to understand that more, I'm happy to chat about that later. It's something that I feel like often gets missed.
Okay,
Yes,
so
the next gentleman in line.
So
please.
Pat Walsh, Privacy Matters. It's particularly troubling when I hear an industry that relies on such personal, intimate aspects of a person's online digital life wait for regulation or regulators to act. Now that is a problem for me. And I want to know a few other things because I haven't heard the word ethics mentioned this morning. And nor have I heard about DNT. So if I have DNT set in my browser, why the hell isn't the ad industry respecting my choice? The industry's chosen not to respect that choice. I've heard about NAI and other things this morning. It's such a problematic thing to use. Most people, and I looked at that Luma landscape, and actually, your complexity should not be my problem as a user to exercise my choice and my rights. And then secondly, I want to know, is it right that a platform and an app store has the power to prevent people deploying privacy tools to protect themselves against the tracking and targeting online? And I'm thinking perhaps of Google and ad nauseum and the ban on ad nauseum. So waiting for some answers.
Should we just collect maybe the questions because there are a lot of people and then just because there are also 2 lines and we don't know how to organize ourselves now. Okay, yeah. He's encouraging me to start, so I will I will say give questions and then probably panelists can choose what they want to answer. My questions are very short. One is, would be interesting to hear your opinion on ad blockers, something that the previous person brought the question, and where does it go and how does it impact different stakeholders, so the business and people and everyone. And another question is, what do you think about advertising leaving the floor of commercial use and entering politics and making people not buy shampoo but buy candidates the same rate of success?
Can you repeat that? I didn't get the second question.
Oh, the second question is, what do you think about advertising leaving the floor of commercial use and entering the politics where it make people to buy shampoos with and political candidates with absolutely the same rate of success? Okay. Thank you. Maybe other questions?
Okay,
well, we're writing. We're not going to forget them, but we have our limitations.
So actually, given the distributed and complex landscape in terms of online advertising and behavioral tracking, are we looking towards a future where there is more consolidation in the industry to improve accountability? Because what I see is that there's going to be a lot of finger pointing that someone else was responsible for aberrations or in terms of behavior. So are we looking towards a more consolidated landscape in that case to improve it?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Finn Myrstad of Norwegian Consumer Council. We do a lot of research into apps, IoT devices. We read the terms and conditions that no one reads. In May, we did a live reading and it took us 32 hours non-stop reading to just read the average terms on an app. And it just, the whole choice discussion that was mentioned, I think is a very fake one. We put the responsibility on users who have no way of actually making any choices. So I have 2 questions. The first one is about the issues that was brought up by the buyers in Clifton, which I thought was very good. And I don't think the panels really addressed the issue of discrimination. So I'm challenging the ad industry. What are you actually doing to fight discrimination? And we're not only talking about fake news now, we're also talking about the types of discrimination that were mentioned in the presentations. And my second question is, I don't see any real effort we are all talking about behavioral advertising, but we're not talking about the question that was brought up by Pat here, the tracking. There are no real ways of opting out of tracking. Your Online Choices, which is a website where you can opt out of targeted advertising, does not allow you to opt out of targeted tracking at all. And if you delete your cookies, you're back on square one. So I don't feel there's a real effort from the industry to actually do something with the tracking, which is cross-device. It's not only cookies, it's browser fingerprinting, device fingerprinting, you name it. Users have no control over their tracking. So what are you doing on those two issues? So basically, what do you do about the discrimination, and what do you do about giving real choices to opt out of tracking? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we took down most of the questions. I think the first one is clearly for Will.
Yeah, I want to make sure other people get a chance to talk here. But I appreciate the interest. Some of the questions are rallying around how the industry works, and I would let maybe Townie, after I talk for a second here, talk about what the industry is doing under the auspices of IAB to try to address some of these issues. I'm personally really concerned about things like making sure people understand the choices that are offered to them and that they have choices about data collection as well as data use. As I talked about before, I think people assume that the only purpose of data collection is targeting, which hopefully I understand it's not, and the reasons for that are fairly important to the industry. I mean, they're the way it's evolved. Again, it doesn't necessarily, it's not the only possible way the industry could work. It's just the way it does work. And we could all talk about normatively whether that's a good thing or not. It just is the reality. That data collection is, you can't offer an online advertising service that doesn't collect data to be able to perform basic functions, even holding targeting aside. And remember that Google makes still most of its money from ads that are just contextual to the search you put in, to the web page you're looking on. Like, the targeting definitely adds a lot of value, especially for a website that can't serve contextual ads, like a website that's maybe it's a blog from somebody talking about human rights. What contextual ads would be relevant for that blog if they want to support their blog through advertising. So, but for most of the industry, targeting is only sort of a value add on top of the basic functioning of the industry, which is about showing ads to an audience. I want to make sure that that's clear, and that I think goes to the heart of why we've had such trouble over the last several years dealing with debates around like do not track or tracking protection and some of these concerns. It's just really hard to figure out how to deal with the way the industry is basically composed, the way the online systems work in terms of collecting data for these business purposes that aren't about the targeting of ads that most people think. And I want to talk, the one other point that I want to mention is around political advertising. I'm also very concerned about this. As an American citizen, I'm watching my country, and I'm concerned about where this has gone. I think this is a general problem all of us need to think about. I would point out, however, that political advertising is far from new. I get my mailbox full of direct mail. So I mean, direct political advertising based in the U.S. based on your voter information is something that's existed for generations and is a little unpleasant part of our democracy, but it's how it's worked, and certainly that's transferred to online. I don't think that's fundamentally changed its basic nature, although I certainly want to understand more, and I hope that people looking into this election and understanding how it was influenced and how it came out are going to be able to look at some of these questions, and I, again, want to be part of that solution, not any part of the problem. Other than that, maybe, Townie, do you have some thoughts about what the industry is working on in terms of better ad standards?
Yeah, I'll try to be really quick. So maybe two things worth saying is that I think it's completely unfair to say that the industry is making no real effort to make it possible to opt out of tracking. I mean, the people are deploying ad blockers. That's just happening. That's a symptom of a problem, which is to do with other things than privacy and data protection. I mean, there are latency and data plan cost issues that are also seen as far as the research I've seen indicates. Even more important causes of ad blocking than necessarily privacy concerns. So the coalition to which Will referred earlier, there's a global cross-ecosystem coalition that is trying to get together and get rid of some of the user experience issues that are driving people to adopt ad blockers. And that is going to deliver a standard probably in the course of the next couple of months. And the industry is perfectly aware that there's saturation. There have been practices that are driving people, as I say, to adopt ad blocking. And we've got to do something about it. And we're going to have to earn our presence on the screen on the merits. And that's just the reality. reality. That's the way forward for durable advertising. With respect to the OBA framework, I mean, the portal OBA framework dates from 2009. I mean, so it does indeed need to be adapted to the new regulatory and legal landscape that I evoked earlier, and that is that's work that's ongoing now. Maybe that's all.
Thank you, Tony. John has something to add.
I just wanted to touch upon the question about finger pointing, which I really liked. It's true that there are an incredible number of layers that are underlying the ad ecosystem. So determining who to point a finger at is a very difficult problem. The question of provenance. For example, why was this ad targeting minors? Maybe the iWonder tool says that this ad is being targeted disproportionately to minors, and that's illegal. The conference theme is Age of Intelligent Machines, and the rationale, the reasoning that these algorithms undertake to figure out who to target an ad to is highly opaque. Determining what the provenance is, why an ad was specifically targeted, we may have ideas or concepts, but root causing a problem like that is very challenging. The person who gave the question asked about consolidation in the industry. I think that's interesting too. I don't see the connection between finger pointing and consolidation necessarily, but it's interesting that our industry has not coalesced. There's not been that much consolidation. I don't see it necessarily moving in that direction.
Okay, there are, I think, there is one question left. What is the industry doing for discrimination? If somebody wants to position, or otherwise I'll take that. You want to go, Chris?
I can take, I think asking the industry to do something, a lot of this is, again, things that are happening with the data and the algorithms that we don't understand. This is still in the research lab. There are research projects underway in universities trying to understand what's being done, how we can improve transparency of the algorithms, and hopefully the industry will be happy to pick this up because they don't want the headlines.
Yeah.
And but I think right now, to say we're going to deal with this problem is right up front is basically going to set us back many years in terms of what we have available on the internet. And I don't know if we want to, if we want to jump that fast. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it seems that we are like, in car industry, the first cars that came in the beginning of the 20th century didn't have airbags or whatever, we are just, the technology is being developed. Hopefully these things will come. When, I don't know. You don't like that, right? Okay, so before you leave, please.
Just before you leave, just to know that you can actually watch some demos of the products that the team has developed upstairs. There's a Types booth in the cafeteria, so please go along and check that out. And also some other colleagues from the team. I don't know if you guys want to stand up so people in the room can see you. Feel free to approach any of them if you see them wandering around during lunch. Or at the coffee breaks, and ask them more questions about the project. And otherwise, just thanks very much to the panel and to everybody who's sat and participated in the conversation.